Okay, so in the next few lectures, I want to talk about police discretion. And police discretion is one of those things I think people generally overlook in debates about policing. It's not one of the ones that gets a lot of attention, one of the issues, but I think it's a really interesting and important one. I think there are some huge problems with police discretion. But I think it's an interesting problem because it seems impossible to imagine a system where we don't have police discretion, and there are also some obviously good features of it. So in this lecture, I want to say a little bit more about what police discretion is, and in the next few lectures, I'll talk about some of the issues that arise with it. Um, in the podcast and the two episodes I had you guys listen to, they do talk about police discretion. They kind of sketch it, and I think they do a pretty good job of that. But I think it's worth going through it in a little bit more detail, just to be clear on what exactly it is. And so police discretion is just a fancy way of saying that the police can and do choose what laws to enforce within certain limits. For certain laws, they can choose whether or not to enforce them. Sometimes they enforce them, sometimes they don't. So, as they talk about in the podcast, police are always supposed to enforce so-called malum in se laws against malum in se actions. Police have discretion in enforcing laws concerning malum prohibitum actions. They can choose if and when to enforce these. I have no idea what the Latin really means. I'm just going to go on what I'm told. My learning Latin didn't go so well. My high school Latin teacher having a bit of a midlife crisis. I think I might have said in the logic lectures, right? I did not learn a lot of Latin. Anyway, let me say a little bit more about what each kind of action is, each kind of law, what kinds of things that they deal with, and give you guys a few examples. Malum in se are acts that are evil in themselves. Intrinsically evil, people will say sometimes. Another way of putting this, naturally evil. People will explain this as recognized as wrong or evil by pretty much everyone in every culture. So I think, that's all a lot of verbiage, a lot of words. I think to see what it actually means, it helps to talk about some examples. Some examples of clearly mala in se actions. Murder, assault, rape, kidnapping, theft. Every sane, decent person recognizes these actions as wrong. The kinds of things that no matter the culture, no matter the place, people are going to recognize these are bad things to do. Malum prohibitum actions are something different. The idea is malum prohibitum actions are not wrong by their very nature. They're not intrinsically wrong. It is not wrong to do these things or not do them, or it wouldn't be. It's only wrong because the law says they're wrong. Let me give you guys a few examples. Again, I think examples help. Here's some things that are unambiguously malum prohibitum laws. 21 as the drinking age, right? We could have a different drinking age. We could have 22 as the drinking age. We could have 19. We could have 18. Some countries in Europe have 16, right? Even if you think there's a good reason not to have a 16-year-old allowed to drink, you probably should admit there's not a great deal of difference between someone who's 20 years old, 6 months, and someone who's 21, right? We choose 21 because it's a nice round number. We could have chosen a different number, right? Same with 55 as the speed limit. There is no law, there is no morality that says that driving 56 miles an hour on a highway is wrong, right? And I mean, notice different states will actually have different default speed limits, right? Especially on the interstates. You can, and people do, set the amounts at different levels. Driving over 55, if it's wrong, is only wrong because we have a law that you can't drive over 55 on the highway. Jaywalking, we could just as easily specify that pedestrians always have the right of way and can just walk in front of cars, but the law says, well, you're not supposed to walk on these streets except in crosswalks, and so on, right? Hunting out of season, we could have a different hunting season than we do, right? Nobody in the world would think we've done some kind of moral wrong if we started hunting season a week earlier and ended it a week sooner, or started it a week later and ended it a week later, right? All of these things, hunting out of season is only wrong because the law says it's wrong. Going 65 on the highway, only wrong if it is wrong because the law says it's wrong. Drinking as a 20-year-old, again, not wrong in itself, only wrong if it is because it's legally prohibited. Some other things that are generally taken to be mala prohibitum: gambling, making or selling knockoff goods, copyright infringement, and hitchhiking. There's nothing wrong in and of itself with gambling, most people would say, right? We as a society have just decided that the bad effects of gambling outweigh the good, right? Or we're going to manage it in careful ways. Making or selling knockoff goods, making a counterfeit Gucci bag and selling it is not wrong in the same way that murdering someone or kidnapping them is, right? This is wrong because we have certain laws for copyright and trademark. We could have different laws for copyright or trademark. We might have a law that, you can't copyright the name of a fashion brand, right? We have a different law, but it wouldn't be immoral to have that one. Hitchhiking the same way, right? Is there anything definitely immoral with hitching a ride in a car? No, we've just decided as a society there are good reasons to have laws against that, right? Now, note, there could be some room for disagreement here, right? Take something like prostitution. Is prostitution intrinsically wrong or not? I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm going to guess some of you would say yes, some of you would say no, right? So there is some room for disagreement on what are mala in se and what are mala prohibitum laws. But I think it's enough for our purposes that there are some laws that are clearly on one side or another. And some very important laws are pretty clearly on one side or the other. It is very clear that traffic laws, pretty much all traffic laws, are mala prohibitum. As I said, you could have different speed limits. You could have cars driving on a different side of the street. You could have different laws about when people need to yield to pedestrians. You could set the age for getting a driver's license at 25. You could make it higher. I don't know, 16 to my mind is already a bit low, but whatever. I'm not sure that there would be any great moral difference between allowing 16-year-olds to drive and 15-year-old and 15 years and 10-month-old people to drive. So traffic laws, everyone agrees, are mala prohibitum. Wrong only because the law says they are. Most people, there might be a little bit more room for disagreement, for controversy, but the vast majority of people who think about these issues will readily admit drug and alcohol laws are mala prohibitum. Only immoral if it is because it's illegal. We could choose to have alcohol illegal. We could choose, we could choose to have different restrictions on alcohol than we do. We could choose to have different drugs legal than we do. Virginia, it seems, is legalizing marijuana. Well, doesn't seem to be anything morally wrong with that, right? So, again, enough for our purposes that we can pretty clearly slot in traffic laws as mala prohibitum. Drug and alcohol laws probably fall there too. Tradition in American policing is that police have huge discretion about enforcing a lot of important laws. Because a lot of important laws, pretty much all the traffic laws, are mala prohibitum. Generally, most people think drug laws are mala prohibitum. Police, for the purposes of policing, they are taken to be such. So police have discretion in enforcing laws about drugs or alcohol. If you walk down the street with a beer in your hand and the cop sees you, he has discretion about whether to give you a hard time, write you a ticket or whatever, right? I mean, you probably all know this, the tradition of people brown bagging. Brown bagging does not make it legal. It just means the cop, because you are trying to hide it a little bit, he has some deniability to himself and everyone else. He might be a little more likely to overlook it, right? Police can choose when to enforce these laws about traffic. They can choose when and if to enforce these laws about drugs, right? These are some super important laws, right? Think about how important cars are to your life. Well, that might be a mala prohibitum law. It covers a lot of your life, though. Police can also break laws, not just choose not to enforce laws, but they can actually choose to break laws in sting and undercover operations, right? I mean, you might not have thought about this, but pretty clearly, for a lot of sting and undercover operations to work, the police are going to have to break the law, right? If your undercover operation is buying pounds and pounds of heroin, well, you're going to have to do this illegal thing, buying pounds and pounds of heroin, right? If your operation is, you want to arrest somebody for taking out a contract on somebody's life, you're going to at least have to pretend to take the money for this person taking out a contract on another person's life. I think it's illegal to try to do that even if the other person has no intention of killing them. So again, the police have to break the law for the undercover operation. Definitely can break mala in se laws for this. I think in some instances they can definitely break mala prohibitum laws for undercover operations. I think in some instances they can even break mala in se. Okay. So hopefully you guys understand what police discretion is and why and how in our society, even if we just focus on drug laws and traffic laws, they give the police such a huge amount of discretion. So how should we feel about police discretion? That's what I want to spend the next few lectures talking about. Just as a heads up, I don't have a simple, this is how you should feel answer. Actually, I think the whole issue is incredibly complicated.